March 13th, 2026. 11:47 p.m. local time. The Persian Gulf. A coral island, 5 miles long, sits in black water 20 miles off the Iranian coast. On it, 50 oil storage tanks holding 18 million barrels of crude. Pipelines running to the mainland like arteries. Loading jetties stretching into deep water where supertankers dock 10 at a time. This island processes 90% of Iran's oil exports. $78 billion a year flows through this rock. It is the single most valuable piece of real estate in the Middle East that most people have never heard of. Its name is Kharg Island. And right now, American bombers are about to obliterate everything military on it. In the next 45 minutes, over 90 precision strikes will hit this 5-mile island. Air defenses, a naval base, mine storage bunkers, missile launchers. Every military target wiped clean. But not a single oil tank will be touched. Not one pipeline. Not one loading crane. The most powerful bombing raid in the Middle East since the Gulf War will surgically avoid the very thing that makes this island worth fighting over. The first explosions light up the horizon. Orange flashes against black sky. The sound arrives seconds later. Deep, rolling thunder that carries across the water. On the mainland, 20 miles away, people step onto rooftops. They watch the sky pulse. They feel the vibrations through the concrete. The president posts to social media while the bombs are still falling. He calls it one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East. Then he adds a threat. If Iran keeps blocking ships through the Strait of Hormuz, he'll come back for the oil. Stop and think about what that means. This island, 5 miles of coral, smaller than a third of Manhattan, is now the fulcrum of a global energy crisis. 20% of the world's oil passes through the waters around it. 5,000 U.S. Marines are heading toward it. Iran is turning it into a fortress. But here's the thing most people don't know. This has happened before. Not once, not twice. At least 4 times in the last 3 centuries, a foreign power has tried to seize, hold, or control Kharg Island. Every single one of them failed. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, Saddam Hussein. Each one learned the same lesson. Kharg Island is easy to take and impossible to keep. So I'm going to take you through the complete history of this island. Every invasion, every occupation, every expulsion. And show you why the pattern that destroyed the Dutch East India Company in 1766 is the exact same pattern playing out right now in 2026. The names change, the weapons change, the island doesn't. (1750). The Dutch East India Company, the VOC, is dying. Not that anyone admits it yet. On paper, it's still the most powerful corporation on Earth. It has its own army, its own navy, its own courts. It negotiates with kings as an equal. But the profits have been bleeding out for decades. Their main Persian Gulf trading post at Bandar Abbas has collapsed. The Gentlemen 17, the VOC's central board, want to abandon the Gulf entirely. Then, a man named Baron Tito Frederick von Kniphausen has an idea. Kniphausen is a German nobleman working as the VOC's agent in Basra. He's ambitious, persuasive, and convinced he can salvage the company's presence in the Gulf with one bold move. His pitch? Forget Bandar Abbas. Forget the mainland entirely. There's a coral island 25 kilometers offshore called Kharg. It has deep water for ships, freshwater springs, and most importantly, it's not under any king's direct control. An Arab ruler named Mir Nasir owns it nominally, and he's willing to sell. In 1753, Kniphausen pays Mir Nasir 2,000 rupees, a pittance, and secures what the VOC believes is perpetual ownership of the island. He declares it a free port, open to all nationalities. He starts building immediately. What rises from the coral is Fort Mosselstein, named after the Governor-General in Batavia, a rectangular stone fortress on the easternmost point of the island, armed initially with cannons salvaged from an abandoned Dutch ship. A garrison of 50 soldiers, 8 artillerymen, a sergeant, 2 corporals. German Catholic mercenaries guard the walls. Kniphausen builds houses in the northeast corner. A church goes up in 1757. A Carmelite priest ministers to what becomes the largest Catholic community in all of Persia. The Bishop of Isfahan relocates to Kharg. Let that sink in. The most important Catholic cleric in Persia moves to a 5-mile coral island. Kniphausen starts pearl diving operations. Javanese sugar and Indian textiles fill the warehouses. Ships from Basra, from Isfahan, from the Indian Ocean dock at the deep-water berths. For a brief, shining moment, Kharg Island looks like exactly what Kniphausen promised, a profitable free port that could save the VOC's Gulf operations. And here's what you need to understand. The VOC didn't just build a trading post on Kharg. They built a private, corporate state. They had their own law, their own soldiers, their own foreign policy. They negotiated with local rulers as a sovereign entity. Sound familiar? In 2026, the Strait of Hormuz crisis is being shaped not just by military force, but by the decisions of insurance conglomerates. When Lloyd's of London pulled war risk coverage from the strait, it effectively shut down 20% of global oil traffic. No government order required. Just as the VOC dragged the Dutch Republic into a conflict it didn't want, today's crisis is being driven by corporate decisions that no single government fully controls. But the VOC made a fatal mistake. They didn't just trade on Kharg. They took sides in local politics. They helped the ruler of Shiraz pursue his enemies. They picked a fight with the one man who knew the Gulf waters better than anyone alive. And that man was already watching. His name was Mir Muhanna, and he was about to teach the most powerful corporation on earth a lesson about home court advantage. Mir Muhanna is the governor of Bandar Rig, a coastal town on the Iranian mainland directly opposite Kharg Island. He inherited the position from his father, Mir Nasir, the same man who sold the island to the Dutch. But Muhanna has no intention of honoring his father's deal. In 1756, 3 years after the Dutch arrive, Muhanna demands 900 tumans in annual rent for the island. The Dutch refuse. Why would they pay? They bought it. They have a fort, they have soldiers, they have cannons, they have the backing of the most powerful trading corporation in history. Muhanna has dhows, small, shallow-draft wooden boats, fast, maneuverable, designed for the coral reefs and shoal waters of the Gulf, the kind of boats that can weave between sandbars, where a Dutch galleon would run aground and die. Muhanna knows every reef, every channel, every current around Kharg. The Dutch know the open ocean. They don't know this water. By 1758, Muhanna starts raiding. He attacks shipping bound for Bushire and Basra. He harasses caravan traffic heading inland. He's not trying to destroy the Dutch. He's trying to bleed them, make Kharg expensive, make the fort a drain, not an asset. 1759. Open hostilities. Civil war erupts on the mainland, and the VOC loses its base at Bandar Abbas. Kharg is suddenly the last Dutch outpost in the entire Persian Gulf, an island fortress surrounded by hostile waters, supplied by ships that have to run Muhanna's gauntlet every time they approach. Spring 1762. Muhanna launches a direct assault on Fort Mosselstein. The Dutch garrison repels it. They think they've won. They haven't. Muhanna isn't trying to storm the walls. He's testing them, learning where the cannons point, where the blind spots are, how fast the garrison can respond. 1763. A truce. Trade resumes briefly. The famous Danish explorer Carsten Niebuhr visits Kharg during his journey through the Gulf. He finds the Dutch commander, Bushman, to be a hospitable host and an energetic merchant. For a moment, it looks like normalcy has returned. Then Bushman's successor, Peter Houting, makes the mistake that ends everything. He helps Karim Khan Zand pursue Muhanna militarily. The Dutch pick a side. And Muhanna, who had been willing to negotiate, now has a personal grudge. 1765. Muhanna is driven from the mainland. He retreats to Khargu, a tiny neighboring island. The Dutch send forces to finish him off. It's a disaster. Muhanna's men are dug into trenches in the sand. They know the tides, they know the approaches, they inflict massive casualties on the Dutch landing party. Then the English try. A ship carrying Indian infantry, sepoys, approaches Khargu looking for fresh water. They scout the island the day before. It looks empty. The next morning, a small unit rows ashore to fill water barrels. They don't know Muhanna's men transferred to the island overnight and hid themselves in trenches dug into the sand. Once the soldiers are far enough from the shore, the Arabs burst from cover. Some of the sepoys throw their weapons into the water and run. The rest are cut down. The English sail back to Bushire with nothing. Now Muhanna turns on Kharg itself. He blockades the garrison, 80 Europeans and 120 Arab soldiers inside Fort Mosselstein. He doesn't attack the walls. He doesn't need to. He just waits. And here's the genius of it. He uses a trick that would make any hostage negotiator proud. He lures the Dutch out on the pretense of negotiation. And then he simply takes the fort. January 1st, 1766. After a 10-day siege, Fort Mosselstein falls. The VOC's ships aren't even allowed to take the company's possessions. Muhanna seizes everything: the cannons, the sugar, the textiles, the church pews. 12 years of Dutch occupation ended by a man with dows and patience. Now pause for a second. The most powerful corporation in history, a company that had its own army, its own navy, traded on 4 continents, was expelled from a 5-mile island by a local governor with wooden boats. Not because the Dutch lacked firepower, because they didn't understand the terrain. They didn't understand the patience of a man who knew that islands are traps for the occupier, not the attacker. The occupier has to supply the fort, has to keep the garrison fed, has to protect the shipping lanes. The attacker just has to wait. Muhanna used Kharg as his stronghold for 3 more years, fending off both Persian and British attempts to dislodge him. He was only overthrown in 1769, not by a foreign army, but by his own people. He fled to Basra, was captured by the Turks, and executed. But his legacy was permanent. No European power would ever successfully hold Kharg Island again. In March 2026, the IRGC is deploying swarm tactics, dozens of small, fast drone boats and smart mines, the digital version of Muhanna's dhows. The U.S. Navy has the most powerful fleet on Earth, but the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide. The coral reefs around Kharg are shallow, and Iran's fast attack boats know every channel. History shows that the unsinkable fortress is actually a trap for the occupier. Muhanna didn't win by force. He won by making the Dutch stay too long, until they ran out of resources. The island always wins. 72 years after Muhanna expelled the Dutch, the British figure out a different approach. They don't want to hold Kharg. They don't want to build a fort. They don't want to trade. They want to use it as a hostage. 1837. The Shah of Persia is besieging the Afghan city of Herat, the gateway to India. The British Empire considers Herat a red line. If Persia takes Herat, Russia, which has enormous influence at the Persian court, gets a direct path toward British India. The great game is being played across Central Asia, and Herat is one of its most important squares. The problem: Britain can't send an army across Afghanistan to defend Herat. The logistics are impossible. So they do something elegant and brutal. On June 19, 1838, a British naval expedition sails into the Persian Gulf and occupies Kharg Island. They don't fire a shot on the mainland. They don't invade Persia. They just sit on the island and wait. A British diplomat named Charles Stoddart delivers a threatening message to the Shah's camp outside Herat. The subtext is simple: "We have your island. Withdraw from Herat, or things get worse." September 9, 1838. The Shah lifts the siege. It worked. The British hold Kharg until 1842, at one point even planning to relocate their entire Gulf diplomatic residency there. Then they leave. The Persians reoccupy it. Crisis over. No war required. 18 years later, the Persians try for Herat again. Same city, same ambition. Same British response. October 1856. Persia captures Herat. Britain is furious. On November 1st, the British East India Company declares war, from Calcutta, not London, to avoid political backlash at home. On December 4th, Major General Stalker occupies Kharg Island, again. The Persians had abandoned it before the British even arrived. They knew what was coming. 6 days later, Bushir on the mainland surrenders. By March 1857, the Treaty of Paris forces Persia to abandon Herat, recognize Afghan independence, and renounce all claims. And here's what you need to understand. The British proved something that echoes directly into 2026. You don't need to win a war to change a country's behavior. You just need to hold its wallet. Both times, Britain's goal wasn't conquest, it was leverage. Seize the island, apply pressure, wait for the other side to calculate that cooperation is cheaper than resistance. The island itself was the ransom note. In March 2026, The US has bombed every military target on Kharg while leaving the oil infrastructure untouched. Trump's message is the same one the British delivered in 1838 and 1856. We're sitting on your wallet. Cooperate, or we squeeze. The island hasn't changed. The strategy hasn't changed. The only question is whether Iran will respond like the Shah, by backing down, or like Mir Muhanna, by making the occupation unbearable. 5 centuries of history on a 5-mile island. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, and now the Americans. Different flags, different weapons, same rock. And the rock always wins. Here's why. Warning 1. The logistics of thirst. Echoing 1766, Kharg Island has freshwater springs, rare in the Gulf. That's what made it valuable for millennia. But those springs support a small population, not a military garrison. The Dutch discovered this. Their Fort Maaselstein required constant resupply from the mainland: food, ammunition, replacement soldiers. Every supply ship had to run Muhanna's gauntlet. The moment the supply chain was contested, the fort became a prison. In 2026, Kharg's population depends on desalination plants. Iran's foreign minister has already accused the US of striking one on nearby Keshem Island. Any occupying force would need to either protect existing desalination infrastructure, which Iran would target, or bring its own water. For thousands of Marines on a coral island 20 miles from a hostile coastline, water is not a luxury. It's a ticking clock. Every blockade of Kharg eventually fails, because the island cannot sustain itself. The question is never whether the occupier can take it. The question is how long they can stay. Warning 2. The sunk cost fallacy. Echoing the VOC, the Dutch East India Company spent more defending Kharg than they ever made in profit. Historian Willem Floor called the entire venture a commercial mishap. The fort was unprofitable from year 1, but the VOC kept pouring money into it because walking away meant admitting failure. They'd built the fort, garrisoned it, armed it, built a church. How could they leave? So they stayed, and they bled, until Muhanna ended it for them. The military term for this is mission creep. The political term is sunk cost fallacy. History tells us that a 2026 military occupation of Kharg Island will follow the same curve. Early success, rising costs, escalating commitment, and the slow realization that the island is draining the occupier faster than it's pressuring the enemy. Warning 3. The pirates' revenge. Echoing Mir Muhanna, when you corner a regional power on their own coastline, you don't create a negotiating partner. You create a pirate. Muhanna didn't start as an enemy of the Dutch. He started as a landlord asking for rent. The Dutch refused. They took sides against him. They helped his enemies pursue him. And they turned a negotiator into the most dangerous man in the Gulf. Iran in 2026 didn't start the war by closing the strait. The strait closed after Iran's supreme leader was killed, its nuclear sites bombed, and its military infrastructure shattered. Iran was cornered. And like Muhanna, cornered powers don't surrender. They go asymmetric. They mine waterways. They launch swarm attacks. They turn every tanker into a target and every choke point into a toll booth. When you take away a country's options, you don't get compliance. You get piracy. 3 warnings, 3 centuries, same island, same lesson. Take it if you can, hold it if you dare. The coral remembers everyone who tried. 3 warnings from history. 3 warnings from history. Fair enough. But every analogy has a breaking point. And there are people in Washington right now, serious people, generals, strategists, former NATO commanders, who will tell you that 2026 is not 1766, that America is not the Dutch East India Company, and that taking Kharg Island might be the single move that ends this war. Here's the case. First, and this is the big one, Kharg Island is Iran's wallet. Not a piece of it, not a share, the wallet. 90% of crude exports, $78 billion a year. If you control Kharg, you control Iran's ability to fund its military, pay its government workers, import food, and keep the lights on. No other single target in this entire war offers that kind of leverage. Senator Lindsey Graham put it bluntly. Seldom in warfare does an enemy provide you a single target like Kharg Island that could dramatically alter the outcome of the conflict. And he's not wrong. Think about what the U.S. has already accomplished. American and Israeli strikes have destroyed roughly 90% of Iran's missile capacity. The supreme leader is dead. The Air Force is shattered. The Navy is gutted. Iran's offensive capabilities have dropped dramatically since the war began. The Iran that Mir Muhanna fought for, a country with full military options, doesn't exist anymore in 2026. This is a regime running on fumes. Taking Kharg doesn't just apply pressure, it turns off the oxygen. Second, the geography actually favors the attacker this time. Kharg is an island. That means it has a natural moat. 20 miles of open water between U.S. forces and the Iranian mainland. Yes, that water is within range of Iranian rockets and drones. But Iran's ability to launch those weapons has been systematically degraded for 4 weeks. The U.S. military has already destroyed the island's air defenses, its naval base, its mine storage facilities, and its missile launchers. The March 13th strike wasn't just a warning shot, it was battlefield preparation. The military cleared the island for exactly this scenario. And unlike the Dutch, who had 50 soldiers and cannons from an abandoned ship, the U.S. would bring Aegis destroyers with ballistic missile defense, Patriot batteries, CRAM systems that shoot down incoming rockets mid-flight, Marine expeditionary units trained specifically for amphibious island seizure. The 82nd Airborne Division, paratroopers who can reinforce within hours, not weeks. This isn't Fort Mosselstein. This is the most advanced military force in human history, deployed on a 5-mile island with clear sightlines in every direction. Third, and this is what the historical analogies miss, you don't have to hold Kharg forever. You just have to hold it long enough. The British proved this twice, 1838, 1856. Both times they seized the island, applied pressure, and left after the other side capitulated. The occupation lasted months, not years. If the U.S. takes Kharg, and Iran's remaining leadership calculates that they've lost their revenue permanently, that there's no way to get it back without negotiating, the war could end in weeks. And here's the part that rarely gets mentioned. Taking Kharg doesn't just hurt Iran, it helps everyone else. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz is closed. 20% of global oil is stuck. Prices are above $120 a barrel. Food shortages are starting. The global economy is bleeding. If the U.S. seizes Kharg and uses it as a bargaining chip to reopen the strait, you don't just end the war. You end the energy crisis. You drop oil prices. You stabilize food markets. You give every country on earth a reason to support what America just did. That's not imperialism. That's crisis management. Defense analysts at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies argue that once Iran's threat capacity is sufficiently degraded, the force protection risks on Kharg drop dramatically. If you could actually deny them that oil export, said senior advisor Richard Goldberg, it would likely mean we've so degraded the regime's threat capacity that we don't fear for our own force protection whether on or near Kharg. In other words, there's a tipping point, and the U.S. may already be past it. Former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant wrote, "On the strategic chessboard of this war, Kharg Island is the next piece. It may be the move that decides the conflict." If that's true, if taking Kharg is the checkmate, then the question isn't whether America can afford to take the island. It's whether America can afford not to. So there it is. 3 warnings from history that say the island is a trap, and a strategic argument from the present that says it might be the key. The Dutch failed because they were a trading company pretending to be an empire. The British succeeded because they took the island with a clear goal and left when the goal was achieved. Which model does 2026 follow? That depends entirely on whether Washington has an exit strategy or just an entrance plan. How 5 centuries of invasions lead directly to today's global crisis. Hit subscribe, because the next 100 years of Kharg's story are even more dangerous than the last 500. After the British leave for the last time in 1857, Kharg goes quiet. Truly quiet. The population dwindles. Date palms, fishing boats, pearl divers. The ruins of Fort Mos Elstein crumble in the salt air. Around 1900, the island falls under the authority of a local tribal leader based at Bandar Rig, the same town that produced Mir Muhanna. Then, Reza Shah Pahlavi, the father of the last Shah, finds a new use for the island. He turns it into an open-air prison, a place to exile political opponents. Kharg becomes a dumping ground for dissidents, isolated, forgotten, surrounded by water. For decades, its only exports are misery and silence. 1956. Engineers arrive. They start building oil storage reservoirs, a 159-kilometer pipeline from the Gachsaran oil field, deep-water loading terminals. By November 1960, the first supertanker docks. The writer Jalal al-Ahmad visits and calls it the orphan pearl of the Persian Gulf. By 1965, Kharg is the largest oil shipment terminal in the world. The National Iranian Oil Company, partnered with the American company Amoco, builds 3 massive terminals: a T-shaped jetty, a sea island platform in 32 meters of water, a third terminal in the south. By the mid-1970s, 7 million barrels a day, 10 supertankers at once. Iran's entire economy now runs through the same coral rock where the Dutch built their doomed fort. Then comes 1979. The Shah falls. The Islamic Revolution. Amoco's property is seized by the state. Kharg's infrastructure becomes the property of the Islamic Republic. And almost immediately, someone decides to bomb it. September 1980. Saddam Hussein invades Iran. The war lasts 8 years, kills over 1 million people. And it turns Kharg Island into a battlefield. By 1984, Iraq can't win on the ground, so Saddam targets the money. French-built super-étendard jets armed with Exocet anti-ship missiles fly south to bomb Kharg. Iraq declares the waters around the island an exclusion zone. Any ship approaching is a target. The first tanker hit at Kharg is the Atlas I, a Turkish vessel struck by Iraqi bombs while loading oil. Then another. Then another. Storage tanks burn. Loading cranes twist into scrap. Over the next 4 years, Kharg is bombed repeatedly. Heavy damage, facilities knocked offline. But Iran doesn't stop. They repair the terminals. They build a shuttle service, 20 tankers running oil south to Kharg Island, escorted by fighter jets. From Kharg, neutral tankers carry it to the world market. Kharg keeps pumping. Even when the island is burning, the oil keeps flowing. Iraq's strategy had a deeper logic. Bomb Kharg, provoke Iran into closing the Strait of Hormuz, force America to intervene on Iraq's side. The U.S. had threatened repeatedly to intervene if the strait were closed. But Iran didn't take the bait. Not then. They kept the strait open. They absorbed the punishment. Think about what that means for today. In the 1980s, Iraq bombed Kharg for 4 straight years, and Iran still kept the strait open. In 2026, after a single night of U.S. strikes, Iran closed it. What changed? Iran learned. They learned that keeping the strait open during the tanker war was a strategic mistake. It let Iraq attack without consequence. This time, closing the strait is the weapon. The lesson of the 1980s, applied in reverse. Iran spent the 40 years since the tanker war fortifying Kharg. Underground storage, hardened bunkers, layered air defenses. They were preparing for the next time someone came for the island. That next time is now. The Strait of Hormuz. 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest, 2 shipping lanes, each about 3 kilometers across. 20 million barrels of oil per day. 20% of global supply. No alternative route. 7 Iranian-controlled islands arc across the entrance like a chain. Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, Lesser Tumb, Hengam, Keshem, Larak, and Hormuz itself. Researchers call this the arch defense. Each island has missile batteries, drone launch sites, and fast attack boat bases. Together they form a gauntlet. Any fleet trying to enter the Gulf has to pass through it. Kharg sits 500 kilometers northwest, deeper inside the Gulf. It's Iran's loading dock. The strait is the exit door. Iran controls both. 2 pressure points. Stop your own exports from Kharg, or stop everyone else's exports through the strait. Crown jewel and jugular, both in the same hands. And here's what makes 2026 different from every previous crisis. Iran isn't threatening to close the strait. It's closed. Insurance companies have pulled war risk coverage. Without insurance, no tanker sails. The busiest oil shipping lane on Earth is dark. And every day it stays dark, oil prices climb, food prices follow, and the political pressure on Washington intensifies. If this story has you hooked, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It really helps us make more content like this. January 2026. Iran is already on fire from within. The largest protests since 1979. 5 million people in the streets. The regime kills thousands, shuts down the internet, 50,000 arrested. February 26th. Last-ditch diplomacy in Geneva. Iran's foreign minister says a deal is within reach. 2 days later, missiles hit Tehran. February 28th, 9:40 a.m. Israeli missiles strike. A.m. Israeli missiles strike a government compound in Tehran. The CIA tracked the supreme leader for months. 30 senior officials killed in 30 seconds. Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. 200 Israeli jets enter Iranian airspace. U.S. Tomahawk cruise missiles launch from warships, nuclear facilities, air bases, command centers. Operation Roaring Lion, Operation Epic Fury. Iran fires back. Ballistic missiles at Israel. Drones at Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan. Saudi air bases targeted. Passenger terminals hit. The entire region erupts. March 2nd. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Not threatened, closed. Any ship that enters will be attacked. No exceptions. Within hours, insurance coverage evaporates. Traffic goes to zero. The first night, not a single tanker broadcasts its position in the strait. A U.S.-flagged tanker hit in Bahrain. A tugboat sunk by missiles. 3 crew missing. Bulk carrier explosion off Abu Dhabi. The strait isn't just closed, it's a kill zone. Oil spikes past $120. Gas stations adjust daily. Airlines cancel routes. Shipping reroutes around Africa. China scrambles. Fertilizer shortages threaten global food supply. March 13th. The bombers come for Kharg. 90 strikes, 45 minutes. Every military target destroyed. Oil infrastructure untouched. Trump's message? Cooperate, or the oil is next. And now, 5,000 Marines are heading toward the island. Iran is fortifying it. Mines, drones, anti-ship missiles, trenches, turning Kharg into what CNN has called a fortified kill zone. History is rhyming so loudly, it's almost screaming. As of today, the strait has been closed for nearly 4 weeks. 2 Marine Expeditionary Units are steaming toward the Gulf. The USS Tripoli is within striking distance. Trump has extended his deadline for striking Iran's oil infrastructure to April 6th. That's 9 days away. The question is, will the U.S. seize Kharg Island? The logic is simple on paper. Take the island, control 90% of Iran's revenue, use it as leverage. But Kharg is 20 miles from the Iranian mainland, within range of rocket artillery, within range of suicide drones. A U.S. force on Kharg would be a target every single day. Iran would turn it into a meat grinder. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis warned that even if the Marines take the island, it's unclear that Iran would capitulate. They might balk at agreeing to give up anything for Kharg, he wrote. The British learned in 1838 that the hostage strategy works, but only when the other side still has something to lose. Iran's supreme leader is already dead. Its military is already degraded. What leverage remains? And there's one more lesson from history that no one in Washington seems to be discussing. In 1988, Donald Trump told a British newspaper, "I'd do a number on Kharg Island. I'd go in and take it." He said that 38 years ago. Now he's president, and the island is waiting. Kharg Island is not a prize, it's a test. The test is always the same. Can you hold it longer than it takes to drain you? The Portuguese couldn't, the Dutch couldn't, the British were smart enough not to try. The question of 2026 is whether America will be the British or the Dutch. As of March 28, 2026, negotiations between the U.S. and Iran are reportedly underway. Trump has described them as very good. Iran has disputed any progress. The strait remains closed. Oil remains above $110. The April 6th deadline looms. The situation is not resolved. The question was never whether America could take Kharg Island. The question, the only question, is whether Kharg Island will take America. If you would like a more in-depth video on the Strait of Hormuz, please click on the video here.